What happens when a backyard oasis becomes the battleground for a feud with an entitled neighbor? Sometimes, standing your ground unveils unexpected paths to community and laughter. Saturday morning shimmered with the promise of sun-soaked freedom. And there I was, lounging by my newly installed pool and blissfully sipping my coffee. The water danced with sunlight like tiny diamonds, and I felt like the king of an oasis that was all mine. But just as I was settling into this paradisiacal existence, my serenity was promptly interrupted by the unmistakable sounds of authoritative heels clicking against the pavement. Karen, clad in her patterned blouse armor, was strutting toward me like a seagull eyeing a picnic. "Ethan," she boomed, pointing toward my pool with all the subtlety of a bull in a china shop, "I need to talk to you about this extravagant display. It's for the community, you know." Seriously? Did she just claim my tranquil retreat as community property? My stomach churned as I forced a smile, desperately suppressing the urge to roll my eyes into the next decade. There's a special kind of indignation reserved for moments like these, and as Karen expounded on her misguided notions of community rights, I felt a spark of chaotic inspiration. It was time to pull a prank so genius it would secure my laughter and vindication for weeks. After she finally prattled off a list of demands that would make a drill sergeant proud, I waved goodbye with feigned enthusiasm, letting her strut away. But she made a colossal mistake in leaving me with unrestricted access to this situation. I quickly pulled out my phone and enlisted help from my friend next door, Marcus, the man with the camera and the charm to match. With a passionate glint in his eye, he gamely agreed to film my great community pool lockdown reveal at the neighborhood barbecue later that evening. I could already picture her face when she saw the new keycard access system. Comedy gold. As I set to work executing my plan, I couldn't help but chuckle at how absurdly satisfying it felt to stand up to Karen. First, I spent an hour raiding the local hardware store for everything I needed: wires, keycard locks, and yes, the most garish neon paint I could find to label it Community Access Door. In my mind, this was not merely a security measure. It was a grand performance art piece about personal boundaries and neighborhood entitlement. Whistling away with glee, I set up the lock with the kind of precision that would make a spy jealous. I ensured that only those who dared to enter my domain had the privilege of using the new access card. A glorious image of Karen sweating and fumbling with the machine filled my thoughts. As evening approached, the neighborhood BBQ sizzled alive with aromas of grilled perfection. I arrived fashionably late, clutching my trusty DIY gadget and wearing a grin that could ignite envy in a Cheshire cat. The party was in full swing, with everyone diving into the food, laughter echoing like playful notes in the warm night air. I smirked and rolled my shoulders back as I went over to Marcus, who was already scouting the perfect angle to capture the show. Cameras? Check. Crowd? Check. The stage was set for the Karen versus Ethan showdown, and I was blissfully ready to watch her crumble like an undercooked cookie. When the moment finally came to unveil my masterpiece, I lured everyone over to the glistening pool with the subtlety of a magician revealing his best trick. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, mustering a flair for the dramatic that would make Shakespeare proud, "I present to you the newest addition to our community pool, revoking access from those who believe it belongs to them." Karen's face was a masterpiece of confusion. Like a deer caught in the headlights, she blinked rapidly, her carefully honed outrage taking a moment to recalibrate. But as she processed my words, the full weight of the situation began to crash down upon her. It was glorious. She took several tentative steps towards the door, her expression setting the stage for a blatant meltdown that I could only dream of. "Ethan, you can't just take away something that belongs to everyone," she bellowed, voice quaking as she gestured wildly. Cue the cascading laughter from the gathered crowd. It was like someone had turned on a live sitcom. It didn't take long for her commanding voice to transform into something more akin to a child throwing a tantrum in a supermarket. "This is ridiculous. What do you think you're doing? This pool is for the community. I demand you remove this ridiculous system right now." Oh, sweet Karen, I thought. If only you knew just how merry I was dancing to the sound of your outrage. As the suspense in the air thickened, I merely shrugged. A grin plastered across my face and exclaimed, "Well, until you secure a keycard, I guess you'll just have to settle for the community fountain." The crowd erupted in laughter again, and I chuckled along as I felt a rush of triumph blossom within me. Karen, her face as red as a ripe tomato, stomped her foot in protest, absurdity evident in every flailing gesture. In that perfectly ridiculous moment, it felt like my backyard wasn't just mine anymore. It was the epicenter of playful rebellion. What would she think next? Would she summon the HOA's wrath, or dig in her heels for a challenge? Only time would tell, but one thing was for sure. It was going to be a deliciously entertaining showdown. As I reveled in the sheer delight of my little spectacle, Karen's indignation only fanned the flames of my amusement. Her face transformed into a canvas of disbelief and fury, almost as if she were auditioning for a role in a dramatic soap opera. "You can't do this. I'm part of the HOA. I have rights, you know," she shrieked, waving her arms to punctuate her point, which only added to the hilarity of the moment. I could hardly stifle the giggles bubbling up inside me as I tuned into the cacophony of laughter erupting from the crowd, each chuckle a drumbeat of my victory over the self-proclaimed neighborhood queen. Perhaps I should have charged admission for this show. It was a full-on comedy featured right in my backyard, and I was living for it. In that instant, I became fully aware of the absurdity of it all. There stood Karen, sophisticated blouse and all, going toe-to-toe with my newly minted community pool lockdown sign, like she was facing her arch nemesis. The atmosphere felt charged, torn between laughter and disbelief, as she continued to flail about, desperately trying to assert her authority that was crumbling faster than an overcooked soufflé. "What's next? A key card to drink water? Marco Polo? You're just trying to shut me out," she sputtered, her face a riot of emotions. As Marcus zoomed in for the perfect shot, I pondered how to capture her grandeur as she fought against the inevitable tide of my DIY genius. I half expected her to summon a battalion of neighbors to her plight, complete with pitchforks and torches. But you know what? I respected her for putting up a fight, even if it was as futile as trying to outrun a hurricane with a paper fan. The laughter from our fellow neighbors only spurred her on, giving me the full experience of nesting beneath the giddy thrill of mischief. Karen began flapping like a distressed peacock, parading her confusion around the perimeter of the pool. You're just one person," she hollered, indignantly poking at my arm, as if I had personally wronged her by installing a lock that merely reaffirmed the boundaries of ownership. Flustered, she looked around, desperation seeping into her assertive tone as though she were seeking validation from our audience to have her headship restored. To cement her absurdity further, she practically snatched her precious phone, probably dialing the HOA like they were the neighborhood's emergency hotline. While Karen floundered, I turned to my neighbors, proudly involving each of them in our growing slapstick showdown. "Anyone for a popcorn refill?" I quipped, gesturing toward the imaginative bowl of snacks, only to turn back and witness Karen climbing the wrought iron fence in a fit of righteous fury, likely visualizing herself as the community superhero who would unmask the villain behind my fabulous pool. I bit my lip, both in laughter and concern. Surely she would make neither a graceful landing nor an eloquent speech with that acrobatics attempt. What is she hoping to accomplish, climbing that fence like a raccoon in search of last night's dinner? I pondered, barely able to suppress my insatiable laughter. The moment was gold, pure, unadulterated gold. Just as I expected, Karen's valiant leap turned into a clumsy tumble, her bright blouse tangling with the fence as she plopped onto the soft grass. The thud sent a ripple through the audience, laughter exploding with the force of a shaken soda can. To my delight, I twirled the camera that Marcus had been expertly operating, capturing each dramatic movement in a way that made her seem more akin to a comedic act in a slapstick film than an HOA enforcer. Looks like someone just lost her status as queen of the community. I couldn't help but yell, my own laughter blending seamlessly into the wave of jubilation around us. The eclectic crowd erupted once more, relishing the prediction of humor melded beautifully with my fortress of solitude. Finally, as Karen picked herself up, the bemusement on her face was priceless. Her stern features melted into a moment of defeat, a hint of her own self-awareness dawning as she fought back red-hot embarrassment. Okay, Ethan, this isn't over. I'll be reporting you to the HOA, she threatened, her words tumbling out like half-baked commands. But my heart soared. This moment signified victory. For me, for Marcus, and for any neighborhood resident tired of Karen's incessant dramatics. I simply chuckled, giving a playful salute and announcing, "And I'll be right here waiting, card in hand." The mantra echoed through the air as neighbors cheered me on, the celebration of freedom from the tyrant looming for far too long. As the crew dispersed, leaving behind the sounds of joyful banter and BBQ leftovers, I felt exhilarated and rejuvenated. I had inadvertently stood up not just for myself, but also for everyone who had received a taste of Karen's entitled antics. So here was an idea. Why not build a community by sharing a little laughter over the spectacle? Perhaps even a pool party for everyone on my street. An invitation to those who respected the neighborhood and her self-made rules. Just imagine sprawling out under the sun, drinks in hand, as the kids splash around while Karen sulks, arms crossed in the corner of her yard. Wouldn't that be a sight to behold? In that moment, as the sun set, casting a golden glow around my sacred oasis, I pondered the future. Could I transform this prank into an opportunity? The thought danced in my head like a quirky theme for a sitcom. Yes, it was precisely the catalyst we needed to lessen the tension and create joy. I could organize the best, most inclusive pool gathering that this neighborhood had ever seen. Within the realm of laughter and shared moments, could we change the narrative and foster a friendship? A smile crept onto my face as I began drafting my community invitation, carefully penning down the ethos of what we could build together. So, who would answer the call to take a plunge into newfound unity? As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, painting my backyard in hues of orange and pink, I reveled in the aftermath of the most unforgettable confrontation I'd ever witnessed. The pool, once a serene sanctuary, had transformed into an arena of hilarity and exasperation, where Karen had showcased her melodramatic flair. I leaned against the poolside, still chuckling as the echoes of laughter danced in the evening air. Did that really just happen? I thought, shaking my head in disbelief while glancing over at Marcus, who was busy transferring footage to his laptop. "This will be a viral masterpiece," he shouted, excitement in his voice as he nudged my shoulder. The look on Karen's face as she tried to climb that fence? Absolutely priceless. But amid the cacophony of humor, I felt a twinge of guilt, like a tiny anchor tethered to my glee. I certainly didn't intend to humiliate Karen, even if her behavior warranted a degree of comedic mockery. I knew her quirks, and her relentless adherence to HOA rules were more than just a nuisance. They were her identity, a definition of a woman striving for control in every aspect of her life. "Ah, geez, Ethan, does this make you the neighborhood bully?" I scolded myself inwardly, fighting against the embarrassment creeping into my chest. Could I really justify my antics as standing up against entitlement? As I pondered the ethics of my endeavors, I realized a shift needed to happen, not just for Karen, but for the whole community and myself. Suddenly, inspiration struck like lightning. What if I turned this spectacle into something greater, I mused, filled with a contagious energy that transcended the previous chaos? Why not throw a community pool party? An event where we could invite everyone, a celebration of camaraderie set against the backdrop of my sparkling oasis. Everyone would receive a formal invitation, bonded in the fight against Karen's hysterics. This was my chance to turn their suppressed laughter into joy and build connections that could open the door for understanding. "Oh yeah," I exclaimed, earning bewildered looks from a couple of neighbors passing by. I hurried inside to grab a notepad, racing against my thoughts as I envisioned the festivities in my mind. Games, food, and laughter echoing through the neighborhood, undercutting the rigid control Karen tried to maintain. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. "Dude, let's make this an event to remember. What about a BBQ competition? Winner gets a golden flip-flop trophy." I dissolved into laughter at his trademark whimsy and reread his message, imagining the neighborhood gathered together, sharing a meal amidst the laughter and unity. A competition? Genius, I thought, already envisioning the scene as I jotted down different ideas like a mad scientist in my living room. Flaming hot grilled burgers, sizzling corn on the cob, and a contest to prove who could venture into the pool's depths for the best cannonball. It was practically a recipe for absurdity and fun. I could already picture Karen's aghast counts as our tight-knit cluster embraced one another and enjoyed our little slice of paradise, free from her domineering presence. Of course, no gathering would come without its complications. I could already envision Karen frantically scouring the HOA regulations for any minutiae to derail my plans. Education had long been on her side, and she thrived on condescending people's endeavors, like a hawk eyeing its next meal. Perhaps I should give her a preview of my intentions, the bait to draw her into the festivities, instead of just firing everything back at me with HOA fines and complaints. "You're going to have to be clever, Ethan," I thought, bolting back outside, the idea of a community meeting solidifying like concrete in my mind. Let's make this happen the right way. With a sense of resolve, I began sketching out a game plan, muttering to myself in energized bursts of anticipation and excitement. The next day, under the early morning sun, I took a deep breath and gathered my courage to knock on doors. If I could rally the neighborhood into a united front and appeal to their yearning for community instead of isolation, we could potentially dazzle Karen with our collective charm. "Ethan, what are you doing? Planning your campaign for neighborhood president?" A neighbor chirped with playful skepticism as I waved my notepad with a grin, welcoming them into my vision. By the end of the morning, word spread like wildfire, and I had a solid group of neighbors excited about the pool party, all buzzing with energy. I could practically taste the anticipation, spiraling into a light-hearted competitive spirit as rumors of our BBQ competition soared. Just as I was filing through ideas and addressing the nuances, I heard the faint sound of a familiar shrill voice in the distance. Karen was out in her yard, arms waving like a conductor guiding an orchestra of frustration. "What's all the racket?" she hollered, her brows furrowing like freshly pressed linen. I barely had time to hide my laughter as I shared a conspiratorial gaze with Marcus. "It's going to be a raucous celebration of unity, Karen," I called out, winking as I watched her expression morph from bewilderment to apprehension. "Be there or be square." With these words drifting toward her, I began drifting into the comfort of my forward-thinking plans, igniting an excitement inside me that felt like a whirlwind of optimism. Would she join in on the fun, or would she insisting on her rules? I knew this was just the beginning of what promised to be a valuable chance at community bonding, and if Karen was too stubborn to join in, so be it. This is going to be epic. They won't want to gossip about me anymore, I thought, nudging Marcus's side playfully, as he began recording backup footage of the interactions. "Let's capture the moments, Marcus. The Karen Chronicles," he declared, inspired by our developing interaction theme. It was time to pivot the narrative toward joy and laughter, forging connections where there seemed to be division. This was our chance to rewrite the script, not just for myself, but for everyone who had been driven to the sidelines of Karen's controlling demeanor. What once began as an absurd spectacle in my backyard had now transformed into a chance for unity, joy, and reclamation of community spirit amidst the poignant chaos. Would we be successful in instilling a sense of newfound camaraderie, or would my antics just provoke further turmoil? Only time would tell as I began the exciting rollout of invitations, planning, and a little stealth maneuvering to ensure that our gathering would be a joyous raucous to remember. Who would come? Would Karen crash the party? Only the water would reveal the tides to come. The day of the pool party arrived, blazing with sun and excitement, as neighborhood banter bubbled in the air like the juiciest of gossip. I woke up with the smell of grilled burgers dancing around my kitchen, thanks to my overly enthusiastic neighbor, Carol, who had volunteered to bring the grill. As I flung open the patio doors, the view of my meticulously arranged backyard filled my spirit with a sense of triumph. Balloons in a dozen colors fluttered against the turquoise sky, and the pool sparkled like a jewel just waiting for its guests to dive in. My phone buzzed relentlessly with last-minute updates and RSVPs, but just like a head chef overseeing a culinary delight, I took one deep breath and steeled myself for the day ahead. I was going to make sure this event not only went off without a hitch, but also dished up a hefty slice of humility to Karen in the process. As the first neighbors trickled in, I buzzed around like a caffeinated bumblebee on a hot summer day, striking up light discussions and handing out drinks like a seasoned bartender. "Welcome to Ethan's oasis. Let the fun begin," I declared with exaggerated flair, and the cheers that followed sent goosebumps racing up my arms. Marcus had transformed into the world's most enthusiastic director, which I found hysterical, as he darted around documenting every interaction and excitement on his video camera. Just imagining the final cut of the Karen Chronicles was enough to stifle a laugh. Each bubbling laugh and happy shriek from my community was a note on an upbeat symphony, drowning out the nagging doubts about whether this was truly the right kind of reconciliation for the neighborhood. But just as I thought the fun was about to reach its crescendo, a sharp, clarion call sliced through the jovial atmosphere. Karen strode out into her yard, her polished exterior gleaming under the sun, armed with a clipboard and those notorious agenda papers, as if she were about to lead an emergency HOA committee meeting right in my backyard. "What is going on here?" she commanded, tightening her grip on that clipboard like it was the last lifeline in a sinking ship. She looked at the flickering grill flames with an expression that could melt metal. "This pool is not for community parties. You're violating HOA laws as we speak." My heart raced, not with fear, but with overwhelming enthusiasm. Her chaotic presence was a catalyst for comic relief I wasn't even expecting. As laughter erupted from my neighbors, I noticed Marcus grinning like a Cheshire cat, hastily switching his camera toward Karen, capturing her over-the-top outrage for all posterity. It was at this moment, like a beautiful cinematic twist, that I realized something vital. I was in control of the narrative, and this was my time to shine. "Karen, join us in the festivities," I called out, a little too cheeky for my own good. The thought of her storming around while clutching that clipboard was like a scene right out of a sitcom where the antagonist faces off against the hero, with me doing my absolute best to be the lighthearted protagonist. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, their expressions a mix of amusement and intrigue at how the great Karen would escape this steaming pot of social chaos I had brewed. "Oh, don't you worry, Ethan. I'll be reporting all of this. Every last burger and splash," she boomed triumphantly, looking awfully pleased with herself. With that one dramatic pivot, laughter erupted around her like fireworks on New Year's Eve. I couldn't resist showering my pool party with a supposed toast in her honor. "To Karen. May our laughter and joy be heard miles away," I shouted, raising my plastic cup. My neighbors not only joined me in cheers, but they even sprang into spontaneous laughter at Karen's disgruntled expression. It was clear she was losing her grip on the authority she was so fiercely wielding. To be a warrior of rules among a merry band of celebrators was proving less relentless than she expected. Just as I thought Karen's frown couldn't get any deeper, she turned and began clutching her phone, potentially dialing the authorities as she threatened earlier. "I've got a few friends who will gladly inform you about the anarchic state of your party." The crowd roared with laughter, cheering on the spaces between her teeth, as they delighted in the absurdity of the situation. This time, I stepped closer. "You know, Karen, you could always join us," I said with an exaggerated smile. "Imagine how socially accepted you'd be. This pool has a great cooling effect on the ego. Besides, there's always a place for authoritative figures like yourself at our BBQ. Unless, of course, the BBQ violates some obscure rule you've scoured on page 40 of the HOA handbook." Finally, I felt a surge of unbelievable camaraderie washing over me that was far stronger than any quirk or tactic Karen might attempt. I cast a glance around my backyard, filled with joyful faces, ranging from skeptical to fully committed to enjoying the day. Everyone was rooting for a peaceful resolution, and it began to dawn on me. This was more than just a party. We were forging connections that would unplug the roots of entitlement that older generations had drilled into their beliefs. Before I could get lost in my thoughts, a wave of triumph swept through me. I wondered, could we band together today to make a stand against the absurd and bring some joy back into our community? I excitedly shifted my gaze from the frenzied pool party to Karen, already anticipating how the tides might turn. Would she crack a smile or stand her ground once and for all? As I stood there, basking in both the sun and the entertaining chaos that was unfolding, I could feel the momentum shifting. My loyal crew of neighbors were rallying around me, and it was like an unexpected flash mob in a musical, everyone just bursting into joy, while Karen tried her darndest to be the rain cloud. She glared out at the happiness surrounding her, her clipboard clutched like a treasure map leading to lost authority. Meanwhile, Marcus was rolling with laughter behind the camera, adjusting angles as if we were documenting a tense standoff from an old western. "Ethan, this is pure gold. The audience is gonna love this," he shouted between fits of giggles. And I thought, why not? Maybe this mess of a moment could be a social media hit. "Karen, you're becoming the star of your very own episode here," I shouted, barely able to contain my laughter as I emphatically measured my pool kicking around the edges, pretending to dive into action while my neighbors cheered me on. "Let's raise a toast to your dedication toward community order and the marvel of enjoyment coming together." My voice rang out like an enthusiastic chorus through the air as I spread joy while taking jabs at her ego. I sensed Karen's cheeks turning crimson, a vibrant hue that rivaled the roses in my garden. The crowd's laughter was a wave crashing against her fortress of entitlement, breaking stones and riling up the spirit of the gathering. But just as it felt like I had painted the most vivid picture of absurdity, Karen revved up for a particularly dramatic speech, stiffening her spine like a soldier preparing for battle. "This isn't over, Ethan. You can't treat community resources like your personal playground," she proclaimed with all the dignity of someone trying to convince an audience of their superiority in an open mic night. The way she hesitated, clenching that clipboard, was like watching a soap opera where the villain's facade wavers for just a second. "Just wait until the HOA hears about your flagrant disregard for the guidelines." A twinge of glee surged through me while I tried to stifle a laugh reminiscent of a sitcom crowd responding to the most ridiculous of lines. "Wow, Karen. Thank you for your impassioned speech. I can already hear the HOA clapping from miles away," I half-seriously retorted, swaying my drink for humor's sake. And just like that, she was off-kilter, juggling indignation with a hint of embarrassment, the perfect cocktail of a neighborhood villain I didn't know I needed. In that moment, I glanced around at my neighbors, all of whom bore expressions marrying incredulousness with delight. It wasn't just a party anymore. It had morphed into an uplifting testimony against the absurdity of entitlement. Marcus, having picked up on my playful tease, leaned closer with excitement like an eager producer, ready to roll out a viral hit. Karen deflated, her authoritative posture looking less like a proud queen and more like a deflated balloon bobbing in the breeze. And before I knew it, amidst the vibes of sunlight and the sound of splashing water, someone in the crowd shouted, "Post the video. Let's show her how ridiculous this is." Like a non-magic wand, I fished for my phone, grinning as the idea took flight in my mind. My heart raced. If I shared the chaotic mini-drama unfolding in front of me, the inevitable karma would surely find its home. With nimble fingers, I typed out a cheeky caption about entitled neighbors and the joys of private pool ownership, and hit post without a second thought. As the video posted, I felt a ripple of anticipation sweep through the crowd. In less than a minute, likes and comments started pouring in, and it wasn't long before I became the unwitting hero of this wild tale. I could practically hear shaking heads from the neighboring towns as they tucked into their phones to witness the hilarity. A collective gasp echoed when Karen's most animated, exaggerated expressions flashed across screens. Suddenly, our spirited wild pool party was making waves beyond the confines of our quiet neighborhood. I couldn't help but revel in the satisfaction of not just reclaiming my domain, but standing up against the absurd in a most public way, alongside this fierce brigade of whimsical neighbors. And as Karen lurked in her corner, her indignant huffing and puffing fading into the background, I finally sank into the lounge chair with an ice-cold drink, relishing victory. I watched as the once mundane depths of our neighborhood became a vivid tapestry of connection, laughter, and undeniable camaraderie against the backdrop of entitled behavior. My phone buzzed incessantly with new notifications, each one a reminder that perhaps we had all witnessed a shift towards a more light-hearted dynamic in our community. Cheers rang out, and with a grin stretched ear to ear, I clinked my plastic cup with someone from the crowd, beaming with the satisfaction that I had turned an ordinary pool day into an unforgettable event. Who knew that standing up against entitlement could feel as magical as a summer breeze?